Peace, everybody. Before I was so rudely interrupted yesterday, let me try to finish this video off. So I was talking about yesterday self-determination versus white supremacy, and I got a phone call, and I had no idea that if you don't have your phone in airplane mode and you're recording, if you answer that phone, the recording will stop. Lesson learned. So the last thing I was touching on was Nat Turner. How Nat Turner chose self-determination over white supremacy and used his free will, God-given free will rights to fight oppression that's given to us in the Quran. We're told in the Quran that oppression is worse than death, and you must fight the oppressor till they're driven out of the land. And you must fight with those who fight with you, but don't transgress limits. And don't pursue the enemy if they flee. It's also in the art of war. Let the enemy flee. Get them out the land. That's the main objective, to end oppression, right? So Nat Turner, he could have did what most of these modern day so-called black Americans do. And they make a whole industry out of oppression, out of white supremacy. They come up with creams, pepper sprays, books, lectures discussing the problem, discussing oppression. And these people get so accustomed to profiting off of oppression, they really don't have an interest in ending it because they're living so lavishly off of white supremacy, off of the plight and the pain of the so-called black community. So these people who make a whole industry, a whole career, a whole image of themselves based on discussing the problems of white supremacy, these people shouldn't be taken seriously because they're actually white supremacists. And before I got cut off, I went into Marcus Garvey, and I talked about how Marcus Garvey, people see Marcus Garvey as a person who practiced self-determination. He was inspired by Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, stuff like that. Do for self, building colleges, but Marcus Garvey practiced white supremacy. He was a white supremacist. I'm gonna tell you why Marcus Garvey was a white supremacist. Everything he did, he had the Caucasian as the reference point. When he created the Black Star Line, he created the Black Star Line because of the White Star Line. If you read his book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, he talked about all of the dastardly, unethical activity perpetrated by the white man. If it was good for the white man, it's also good for the Negro. So we should also practice, dastardly deeds to get ahead. Now, what he didn't really understand was the reason the so-called white man was succeeding doing wickedness is because they are in the court systems, Congress, Supreme Court, the legislatives, which is Congress, they the president. They in all aspects of the power structures of America. Even to this very day, the power structures of America don't penalize Caucasians for the same crimes that they penalize so-called black people for. So by Marcus Garvey telling the black people to practice the wicked activities of the white man, he literally set us up for failure. He set us up for the prison industry. The only time we had success in America under white supremacy was when we didn't do crime, when we did for self. Even though we became victims, we lacked the ability to truly defend ourselves. Even though in Chicago, when they tried to burn down Bronzeville, we had a lot of ex-soldiers from World War I that actually defended Bronzeville against the white supremacy. But when you had situations like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when you totally surrounded and a whole government is trying to destroy you, they successfully destroyed many black cities because they was prosperous, righteous, church-going people. They just lacked the defense against the enemy. Well, Marcus Garvey, he perpetrated white supremacy. And if you read his book, Message to the People, which has 42 classes, one of his classes warns us against taking money from white supremacist philanthropists, which is a white philanthropist is a white supremacist, because they will get you comfortable with the money. And once they get you comfortable with the money, once you actually have a payroll based on and depending on that money, they could threaten to withhold the money unless you comply with their agenda. And this is what the so-called black supremacist people or the black white supremacists do now. They take the money, like the Black Lives Matter movement, or just a regular YouTuber who has an industry solely based on white supremacy. Now, if a person was to remove white supremacy, a lot of these YouTubers, a lot of these black organizations will have no purpose of existence. They have no contingency plan, meaning they have no plan to transition if they were actually successful. Like the Crisis magazine, the NAACP, they lasted for decades. They allegedly was set up to end white supremacy, but all they did was discuss white supremacy, talk about the atrocities, and get paid. The Urban League still exists. That's they're not trying to end nothing. They're just making a living off of the plight and the pain. But self-determination is the fail-safe that all human beings have, because you could choose not to comply. A person can't make a person do anything. They can coerce you to do it. They could threaten you. They could use tactics by threatening family members to get you to comply. They can threaten pain, sanctions, but you can still not comply and endure the punishment. Like, there's literally, we all are collectively subscribed to white supremacy. We don't really practice group autonomy. Like every sovereign nation, even Jamaica, came together and decided that they were going to practice group autonomy. And once they decided that, the so-called white supremacy had to leave, because they cannot exist without your cooperation, without your contract. You have to be in compliance with your oppressor. As soon as you fight the oppressor every single second, they will be exhausted. You might defeat them, but a lot of us don't try. Like Fred Hampton say, dare to struggle, dare to win. A lot of us don't dare to struggle. We don't dare to practice self-determination, which is also autonomy, which is also sovereignty. Now, me personally, I have been a sovereign my entire life. I always practice autonomy. You know, I always practice self-determination, because there was no choice. You know, they never had a job for me. It was just it was basically by default that I had to be a sovereign. Even though you got certain kingdoms in which they have been conquered by another kingdom or another government, that don't negate the fact that that person is still a sovereign. Even though they're not exercising power over the entire government, they still have that authority and that ability. Like your persona isn't based on an outside person or outside factors. It's like a lion can never not be a lion. Just because you might put a lion in a jungle or a zoo, or you might be in proximity or close or dominating, or even if you kill the lion, it's still a lion. But they want me to believe that I'm not a sovereign just because they took over ancient Egypt or they took over the Moors. I'm no longer an emperor, a king, a prince. They could never take that away. And I could exercise dominion over my own entire life. And I could choose who I interact with, who I don't interact with, who I spend money with, who I don't spend money with. But as a group, if a group of people did that, that group of people will ascend to great power and influence. This is called group autonomy. But the group of so-called Negro black people that they call us Negro black people, they are collectively subscribed to subjection. And they think this is the only option, is being subjected by white supremacy. But they could choose self-determination. Choose your own thinking process. Choose your own thoughts, your own methodology. of existing, because you were this world, you was born into this world by yourself, and there was no instructions on how to exist in this world. These prescribed preconditions that they imposed upon the so-called Negro isn't uh, obligatory. I should say that. It is not necessary to exist. There's no rules given to a bird. They just exist. They fly. They exercise their autonomy, their dominion, and they take what they can. If they can't take it, they're gonna flee. If there's a bigger bird, they're gonna get up out of there. But they get what they can. And a lot of us human beings, we don't even try to do that. We just go along as a slave, a drone, or ant, walking in line, getting the crumbs that's allocated instead of taking what's yours, taking what you can. A lot of us don't even take what we can, but we have the ability to take, to express, to become. We forfeit our own potentiality. And a lot of it is solely because we are listening to these so-called scholars teaching us how much of a oppressed slave we are. John Henry Clark, all these black scholars is telling you what you can't do, how much you can't do. The only scholar that I could think of who actually told us what we can do was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and demonstrated what we can do. He say, who was the original man? The Asiatic black man, maker, owner, ruler, cream of the earth, God of the universe. That's what he told us. There's nothing you can't do. We have no birth record. They don't know. There was never a time when we wasn't. But you got these black scholars telling you how much of oppressed you are, brain hypnotizing you. When you hypnotize a person, you set limits to their behavior and activity and ability. You hinder them psychologically. Now, self-determination is the key factor in a fail-safe to make sure that all people are free to exercise autonomy, free will to their best potential. And that's about it right there.